Jim Harbaugh, right, has interviewed with a couple NFL teams. It's been all the rage, really, during the season. If he did win it, would he leave? We've talked about that many times. And trying to guess what Jim Harbaugh is going to do is futile, right? We can speculate. We can talk about it. Nobody knows what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. He's basically the Joker. You never know what he's going to do next. And I'm not going to try to guess what he's going to do. But I will say what I think he should do. And Michigan fans, you're probably going to be 13 flavors of pissed off, but that's okay because you're going to understand what I'm saying. If you grew up with a sibling or you had a close friend or a cousin or somebody that was kind of your competition. You had a lot of respect, but you grew up competing, whether it's for affection, whether it's for championships, whether it's just one-on-one basketball in the driveway, right? There's always that one person. And Jim Harbaugh's done a ton. He's done a ton in his career. It's already been a very illustrious career, capped off with a national championship at Michigan. But Jim Harbaugh hasn't won a Thanksgiving since he lost to John. Jim Harbaugh hasn't won a Christmas dinner since he lost to John. Hell, he hasn't even won, hey, let's get together on Halloween and let the kids go trick-or-treat. Because he can win all the national championships he wants at Michigan. And it's incredible. Greatest coach, in my opinion, to ever coach at Michigan. But he did lose a Super Bowl to his brother, John. So every Thanksgiving, when their dad, Jack's, cutting the turkey, it feels like there may be a little bit more affection for John, even though Jim's doing great. Congrats on winning the college championship at your alma mater, bud. I'm really proud of you. But, John, you remember that Super Bowl? The biggest game in football, the worldwide phenomenon that is the Super Bowl? Until Jim gets back there and wins that, he's not winning family gatherings. And that's important. I got a brother. We still compete all the time. All the time. So deep down, if I'm Jim Harbaugh, there's nothing else I can accomplish at Michigan. Let's be honest. Got him back to the top of the mountain. It's a great time to go, to get off the roller coaster and go back and try and just win Thanksgiving dinner again, David. I mean, we talk about the SEC. It just means more. Family rivalries. It just means more. It's a great time to bring in former Michigan quarterback David Cohn. David, what say you? Why am I 100% correct? Just like everybody in the chat, I'm sure, agrees with me.
Well, we all do the Jim Harbaugh to the NFL song and dance every single offseason. Why wouldn't we do it the year he wins the national championship and has his best season ever? Look, you said a lot of things right there. Jim Harbaugh is always going to have interest from the NFL because of what he did with the San Francisco 49ers. That program was in decline for 15 years since Steve Young won the Super Bowl in the mid-90s. He resurrected it. He's always going to have NFL interest, right? And because we've seen these rumors pop up every single offseason, it proves that he's entertaining them. Nick Saban, I think, could go coach at the NFL level again throughout his second stint at Alabama, but those rumors never really popped up after they made him the highest paid coach because he wasn't entertaining them. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. And when you talk about the family dynamic, clearly it was proven true by Jim Harbaugh's first words after winning the national championship. What did he say at the podium? He said, "I can now sit at the big boy table at Thanksgiving. My father won a national championship. My brother won a Super Bowl. Now I can sit at the big boy table." Not just a metaphor like that. He said at Thanksgiving, which is the phrase you have been using for a long time. So clearly that means something to him. I understand why he would want to return to the NFL. I honestly think it has more to do with two things. One, the NCAA constantly trying to run this guy out of college football, which I think is a real miss. I see him as sort of very similar to a Mike Leach, right? He's great for college football. Keep him in the game. Don't run him to the NFL. But then the other part of it too is the NFL is just going to be able to pay him more money. I've heard that the Chargers are putting together an offer between $15 and $18 million annually. He has the same agent that Sean Payton had, who worked, I think that was it $18 to $20 million a year from the Broncos, something like that. So Michigan's not going to be able to match that, even if they made him the highest paid coach at 12.5, 13 million a year or something like that. I just don't think they're going to be able to get up into the NFL range, which those numbers just keep climbing higher and higher. And honestly, Jake, what better time would there to be right now? I can't remember the exact phrase you just used in your open, but he's done all he can do for Michigan, something like that. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I personally, I have a vested interest in this program, having played there. Of course, I want Jim Harbaugh to stay now that he's created all this momentum. Michigan fans want him to stay. You've finally gotten over the hump. We have something special we're building. You do your version of what Nick Saban was able to do. But Michigan fans will never love the guy more than they do right now. If he won 5 championships in a row, it wouldn't be any more affection than that first one that you were able to get over the hump and have the greatest season in Michigan history. So for a lot of reasons, it makes sense for Jim Harbaugh to return to the NFL. But at the same time, we never know what this guy's going to do. No one knows what this guy's going to do. And retiring as the head coach at Michigan certainly would mean a lot to him. His family's already in Ann Arbor. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way.
Yeah, and listen, you never forget your first kiss, right? And Michigan fans have been kissed before. It's just been a long time. Y'all been in a coma for a long time. Like you woke up out of a coma, hey, you got that first kiss back, and you remember how great it was. So I agree with you 100%. And again, it goes back to something a lot. I don't think the word is barbaric, but it goes back to something deeply instinctual. Like at some point, the second brother, the one who's not in line to be king, he wants a taste of that glory too. You let him sit at the table, all of a sudden, hey, maybe he wants to be head of the table. Maybe he thinks he should get together an army and go take over. I just, there's something about it. And you grew up with siblings, David, you understand what I'm saying. And look, when it comes down to the NFL and the franchise that gets him, that's a whole nother matter. That's a whole nother discussion. But if you're a Michigan fan that says, no, we don't want this party to be over. We don't want this to be done. We're enjoying our time in the sun. I get that. But guess what? There's no need to panic. You want to know the plus side of having your head coach suspended for like half the games over the past 2 seasons? You got a guy in Sharon Moore that's basically been the head coach in the biggest games outside of the college football playoff. What better on-the-job training than to actually do it against Ohio State? To actually have to do it in some of the biggest games and the biggest moments when you're not even the head guy, let alone being the head guy, having that even more control than what you've had. So you've got a proven guy in Sharon Moore that can do it. So even in the worst case scenario, because I think Moore would be the guy that would get elevated there, right? And you try and keep mentor. Even in the worst case scenario, when Batman retires, Robin's ready to take over and just put the mask on and go do it himself. So, I mean, there is, David, regardless of what happens, Michigan fans, I don't think, should be pissed at Jim Harbaugh if he decides to leave. No. But again, you've got the best on-the-job trained guy possible. He's already sat in the chair a couple times, right? He's not going to be overwhelmed by it. He already knows kind of how to go about it. He knows the structure and the skeleton of it, even in the biggest games.
100%. No Michigan fan's going to be mad at Jim Harbaugh if he decides to return to the NFL, especially with all this nonsense going on with the NCAA. And look, Michigan itself, there's some internal conflicts. Michigan still hasn't solidified a contract offer to the guy. Especially, they're not going to be mad, especially because of what he just did. It wasn't just you finally beat the Buckeyes for 3 straight years or won the Big Ten championships. You just won the national championship and went 15-0. Do you realize how long we can live off this? I'm going to be talking about this season when I'm 82 years old if I make it that long. So Michigan fans can live off this. I don't even think there'll be an external coaching search, Jake, to be honest, for the reasons you said. One guy in Schembechler Hall, before he's even the head coach, is already 6-0 with a win over the Buckeyes. Sharon Moore went out to midfield and shook hands with Ryan Day after beating him. That's the guy you elevate. Will the ceiling be as high as it was with Jim Harbaugh? Probably not, because we're talking about the greatest season the program just had in its history. But I just don't see the floor being that low, because you're keeping a cohesion together in the time where we've seen the most seismic shifts in college football. And you mentioned something else about, we'll talk later about which NFL jobs and that sort of a secondary thing. It does play into it which NFL jobs are open, because, I don't think Jim Harbaugh is taking every single call. And I thought it was interesting that he did interview with the Atlanta Falcons, and maybe he does take a couple interviews with franchises that he would not take a head coaching job with. But the Chargers being open is the key to this whole thing. And I know we're going to get into this in rapid fire, but Jerry Jones has said that Mike McCarthy is going to be coming back in 2024. So the Cowboys job is not open. That's one less job that certainly Jim Harbaugh would be interested in. But the Chargers job makes sense for so many reasons. How often do you get to jump up to the NFL level and take over a franchise that is not completely destroyed? You have a franchise quarterback in his prime and his contracts taken care of, and you have mega pieces outside of that on both sides of the football. All you need is some guidance and some direction. And for, everything we've talked about with Justin Herbert, where, hey, he's the next star and rising, but he has to quit turning the football over and he has to develop a little bit more and smooth off some of those edges. Who better than the quarterback whisperer and Jim Harbaugh, who coached Andrew Luck, who coached Alex Smith, who drafted Colin Kaepernick and got the most out of him before he became a sideshow and a disaster. So that job makes a lot of sense. If that job wasn't open, I wonder if we'd be seeing so much smoke right now about Jim Harbaugh to the NFL.
Well, before we get to the chat, you bring up a great point. You said a word that we're not seeing in Alabama right now, that if Sharon Moore were to be elevated to be that guy, it's cohesion, right? I don't think, even though the transfer portal would open for the 30-day rule, if Jim Harbaugh were to go to the NFL, I think a lot of guys would stay, and it would make the transition a whole lot easier. You wouldn't lose nearly as many guys off the ship if Sharon Moore was elevated to head coach, because you're keeping that continuity. That's a word, right? Cohesion and continuity. Those are going to kind of dictate and define whether teams are able to win over time, or if they're just going to be one-off winners that kind of sink back down to reality, even though we are seeing parity increase in college football, which I think is a great thing. So we're going to continue to monitor this. I saw, David, a report that in the contract that's being renegotiated with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, that there would be a clause in there saying that regardless of any NCAA, he could not be fired for any NCAA infraction, which basically means it's a get out of jail free card.
Yeah,
like, if that's literally in there, if that's in there, and we know why it's in there. Some thesis on why they're putting that in there. The NCAA and Jim Harbaugh, they're like oil and water. I just feel like one's Jason Bourne and the other one's the government agency. But when it comes down to it, that is just a hilarious clause. Think about that in any other business, right? Mm-hmm. Hey man, listen, you work on the stock market. We won't, if the SEC comes in and investigates you for anything, insider trading or whatever, we're not going to fire you, right? We're going to keep you on the stock exchange. Just imagine that in any other form. Like, it's crazy to think about.
I've heard from reliable sources that is the sticking point right now. It's not even so much the money. Michigan has the money to be able to make a mega offer, but Jim Harbaugh's side has said, you can't fire me based off whatever the NCAA is going to come out with on these investigations. And it makes so much sense. I mean, keep in mind, it's not like Jim Harbaugh saying, hey, I want a clause in my contract that says you can't fire me no matter what the NCAA ever comes after me with in the future. No, it's based off these investigations that we're already talking about. And if the athletic director, Ward Manuel, and the university doesn't already know the details of that investigation, especially when the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, has already come out and said, no, Michigan's national championship is not tainted. They won it fair and square. Then why are the investigations even still open? We shouldn't be talking about this. Of course, you should put that clause in. Michigan should have offered that. If you're going to offer a guy a mega contract, knowing that there's these two investigations out there, then why would you offer the guy unless you're willing to acknowledge that part of it? Like, hey, we're not going to fire you based off these things that have already happened, because we know what's in there and we know it's bogus. So that all makes sense. On the Sharon Moore being elevated part of it, you can only do that, I think, because Michigan just won the national championship. You're playing with a little bit more house money. I think Alabama's mindset was, hey, let's go out and hire the best guy possible to keep our ceiling as high as possible. Maybe there'll be a little regression in the transfer portal, which we're going to get to that today too. There'll be some regression in the transfer portal right away, but we're hiring the best coach possible. Whereas Michigan saying, hey, we don't know if the ceiling will be as high with Sharon Moore as it is with Jim Harbaugh, but you know what? This is the guy who just was on the staff to win a national championship. Let's keep the cohesion. This will get us by 3 or 4 seasons. And if it hits rock bottom, like the way it did when Rich Rodriguez came in when I was there, then we'll make a change.
Hey, YouTube, what's up? Thanks for stopping by. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Check us out. Roll through our videos. We drop content all the time. Turn that notification bell on as well so you can be updated when we do release it.